Hello everyone. On this channel, I feel that information about what is happening in China is often not correctly conveyed to countries other than China, so I will be disseminating the information I have gathered in English. I'm getting information from multiple media, so I'd be happy if you could comment on the content of the video. Also, English is not my native language, so I use an AI speaker to create the voice to convey the information correctly. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel and support us. This time, I will tell you about the fact that the United States is angry with China, which is the current situation of drug addiction spreading in the United States. As previously reported, the United States has indicted 4 Chinese manufacturers and 8 individuals for their involvement in illegal fentanyl trafficking. And it calls on the Chinese government to immediately stop the activities of those associated with fentanyl. In short, the US is blaming China for the influx of fentanyl into the US. This is a big story that the US government has been viewing as a problem since the Trump administration. China, on the other hand, claims that it is not China's fault. During the Trump administration, a large amount of fentanyl was sent from China to the United States by mail. Therefore, I think that there is a common understanding among those involved that there is no reason why China is not involved in the fentanyl issue. During a recent visit to China, Blinken said he needed help from China to stop fentanyl from entering the United States. And in response to the U.S. indictment against Chinese pharmaceutical manufacturers and others, the Chinese embassy in the U.S. claims that it will pose an obstacle to U.S.-China cooperation in dealing with the influx of fentanyl into the U.S. In other words, even though China claims that it has nothing to do with it, it is said that it will be difficult to stop the influx of fentanyl without China's cooperation. China itself has been implicated in the influx of fentanyl into the United States. And despite Blinken saying it needs China's cooperation on the issue, the U.S. is prosecuting Chinese manufacturers. The U.S. government has asked the CCP to help prevent fentanyl from entering the U.S., but the CCP does not intend to prevent fentanyl from entering the U.S. may not be capable of doing so. I think there were various exchanges behind the scenes, but in the end, I think we came to the conclusion that unless the U.S. side takes strict measures, this issue will not be resolved. As I mentioned earlier, this issue has been one of the major issues in U.S.-China relations since the Trump era, but it seems that it has not been resolved yet. By the way, during the Trump administration, Trump was furious because he couldn't stop everything because it was sent by mail. Currently, it is said that sending by mail has become quite blocked. And now it is coming in via Mexico, but the U.S. side claims that it is China that is supplying fentanyl and its raw materials to Mexican organizations, and is working to control transportation routes. By the way, fentanyl is a drug that is not heard in Japan. China has its own drug problem, but fentanyl is not a major illegal drug. Fentanyl is a very dangerous drug because it is an illegal drug that suppresses breathing even in small doses and can lead to death. It is a so-called opioid drug and is related to heroin. Why is fentanyl used so much instead of heroin in America? This is also a problem in America. I've introduced it in previous videos, so I won't go into it this time. This time, I will introduce the drug situation in China. There are so-called 3 major drugs when it comes to what kind of drugs are often abused in China. One of them is heroin. Its action is said to be similar to that of fentanyl. It is a class of drugs that give the sensation of relaxation or the sensation of thought stopping. The origin of heroin is opium. China has a history of opium wars and has a very harsh image of this type of drug, but the reality is that it is still quite prevalent in China. And the other is methamphetamine. In Chinese, it is written as ice poison, but unlike heroin, it is a drug with a stimulant effect. It is a type of stimulant that is said to be abused quite often in Japan. This family of drugs are substances of plant origin. The other is a substance called ketamine. This is a hallucinogenic drug that is heavily abused in China. The 3 major illegal drugs in China are said to be heroin, methamphetamine, and ketamine, but fentanyl is not among them. By the way, fentanyl is also used as a medicine. It is also used as a pain reliever and has legal uses. In other words, fentanyl also has an aspect as a legally produced drug. In fact, globally, China is likely to become the largest exporter, even if only for legal exports. Therefore, China can be said to be the largest producer of fentanyl. However, fentanyl abuse is not as common as other drugs in China. This is the situation. So where do China's illegal drugs come from? It seems that the Chinese Communist Party government does not have a complete grasp of the production route. Due to the clandestine circulation of such substances, it is impossible to grasp the full picture. However, information exists about where those drugs came from, as some of them get caught every year. As for the three major drugs, the total amount of drugs grasped by the Chinese authorities in 2021 is reported to be 17.3 tons, of which 15.3 tons are smuggled products and 2 tons are domestically manufactured products. Therefore, it can be said that there are both imported and domestically produced drugs in China. In Japan, marijuana, stimulants, and heroin are sometimes reported, but most of them are thought to be smuggled. In Japan, drug crime is difficult without a network of smuggling and selling. In the case of China, there are people who produce stimulants in China as well. One of the major reasons for this is that China produces a large amount of plants that are raw materials for stimulants. Since the plant is also a source of herbal medicine, there is considerable dissemination of information on how to extract the substance to make stimulant drugs. Therefore, anyone can make it, but since many processes are required, if an amateur tries to make it, the cost performance is poor and there are economic restrictions. Therefore, it seems that people who can produce stimulants in a profitable manner are useful even in the dark society. This really shows the drug situation in China. Even within China, there are regional differences in the prevalence of drugs. Broadly speaking, border areas and areas facing the sea have a lot of drugs. Drugs in China are both domestically produced and smuggled, but areas bordering other countries and areas facing the sea tend to have a large influx of drugs from abroad. The other is that many Chinese came to areas where economic development was not progressing and expanded the money economy. It is believed that there are. Therefore, it seems that drug crimes are often exposed in such areas. However, I do not think that this represents the whole picture of drug crime in China as a whole. In China, there is a popular notion that drug crime is rampant in the south. Because drugs are produced in the so-called Golden Triangle and enter China through the southern border. That is why China is focusing on cracking down on drugs from the south. That means that in the south of China, it seems that police spies are involved in gathering information on drug crimes, and in some cases, large drug crime organizations. However, other regions seem to be less focused on catching them. It is quite possible that it is quite prevalent in other areas, simply because it has not been caught, or only infrequently. From the criminal's point of view, one area is hard to crack down on, so they want to go to another. Therefore, it is thought that they will move to inland areas and do business. Also, if crackdowns are severe in China, some organizations will want to do business in countries where crackdowns are loose or punishments are loose. That's all for now. See you next time.